All right. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our recipe for a winter solstice ritual, and I'm here with my dear friend and co-founder, Melanie. And we are going to talk all things winter solstice ritual, and then we're going to dive in to meditation and what the ritual might look like for you. How you doing today, Melanie?
I'm super excited. I'm good. I'm happy that we're doing another video for our lovely friends, but also I love the winter solstice. And as someone who does some of the craft rather frequently, winter solstice is a really incredible time. There's a lot of different associations and correspondences and stories that come up. So I'm excited to get into it because it's a very powerful time of the year to be doing intentional work, shadow work, the work.
I love that. And I think it's really special that you're here because you're probably one of my only friends that I am like really close with that actually kind of does have their own ritual, kind of like witchcraft. And you've kind of been practicing for how long now?
Ooh, it's like a broad umbrella, so it's really hard to narrow it down. I think I've had a very intentional relationship with nature and have done my spirituality and my practice has always been earth based. So for me, in and of itself, that can fall under the category of paganism or witchcraft. There's so many nuances in that world, so it really depends what tickles your own fancy. For me, I think the craft, particular like witchcraft, doing witchcraft, just think it started with mud pies really innocently in the backyard, to be
I
honest.
love that.
Working and calling in different, yeah, I know. It's so silly. It's such like a gentle introduction to the world of, it's not like an exciting, oh, I've discovered magic story. It's just that I've always been one with nature. I think we are all one with nature, but that's been my doorway into spirituality as well as witchcraft and whatever way you want to cut it, it has been through nature. So that is why I think the pathways of paganism or witchcraft speak so directly to my heart because it's all earth based. And I think that's the beauty. It's also crafty and artistic. And that is another aspect that's really fundamental in my existence in my everyday life is just the making of things, which is the craft in witchcraft. So working with what you have, energetically imbuing things, celebrating, working with, honoring nature.
Love that.
So
That's
forever,
beautiful.
I guess,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I love the mud pies from childhood. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a fairly new realm for me. So, I mean, I've worked with plant medicine in a ceremonial aspect, but I guess from a lot of perspectives, I would be considered more new age spirituality. But we at Alchemia are
Mm-hmm.
trying to create a deep connection with self and be able to introduce you to multiple different tools and ways of looking at things. And because Melanie, you hold this beautiful practice within yourself, and I love that you've also kind of gotten there. It sounds very intuitively. I think this can be a beautiful time for us to invite that in for our viewers and our listeners and whoever wants to be with us today at Alchemia to actually do this as well for themselves, is to come at this from what is these, like, learning about something new and then, taking what resonates and discarding the rest. And that, like, yeah, we can intuitively create our own practice and have our own relationships with these different energies we're going to bring into this ritual, with different plants, with different guides, different goddesses, all of these different aspects of spirituality and witchcraft we can use more intuitively maybe than, I guess, what you would call more like hardcore witchcraft users might.
Totally. Yeah, there's categories, right? And like just with everything, there's levels and categories, and you can get really like traditional or ceremonial. I definitely, in like the broad stroke of things, fall under like a folk practitioner. I even happen to live in a cottage in the forest, so some might call me a hedge witch. But there's definitely different levels of ceremonial structure that goes into the craft. I would fall for sure more under folk, which I think is a lot of the integration between the craft per se and the broad category of new age spirituality. Um, it's a topic that I think is really interesting, and I'm leaning further in because I'm not someone who hangs on really tightly to labels in general. So to navigate the conversation between new age spirituality and witchcraft, I didn't really know that there was like separate camps until I was on the internet. Like, I mean, again, I feel like on the internet you can find separate camps for literally any topic. But I actually made a thread post the other day saying that walking the fine line between New Age spirituality and witchcraft should be considered an extreme sport. There are people who hold pretty strict and serious opinions in both camps, I guess. But like you said, a lot of Alchemia's approach is like the non-polarity, the not othering the other and not condemning or saying something's better than. And there's a lot of power, I know, in my own experience to like tap in and listen into my own being, my own dang soul, and be like, okay, what do I want to do in this moment? What do I have at my disposal? And I think I could walk around every day screaming like, oh, that's witchcraft. Lit a candle, said a prayer, witchcraft. It's something that I think for me is really subtle and bleeds into every part of my life. And then if you look at the labels and the categories, especially in the online space, people would be like, oh, that's witchcraft. It's really a beautiful connection and a crossover, I think, between New Age spirituality would be things like plant medicine, shamanistic practices, herbalism. All of that is like pivotal within witchcraft. I mean, you're a medicine woman, a healer in the old school sense of the word, right? Witch, wise one, all of that. These lines get very blurry for me. So I don't know if it really has ever served me to separate them. But maybe it serves some people, right? I don't know. I guess labeling things can help humans understand stuff. What I do a lot of, though, and I think what we're going to really call in today is working with plants, which are universal teachers. They transcend all boundaries. We've mentioned it several times. Often it comes up that plants don't have boundaries. They don't understand the boxes we humans like to paint and put things in. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of the basket I approach quote unquote witchcraft with. I like to craft. I like to make things manifest with my hands. I like to use symbolic representation of intentions, of energies, of intent, like the 3D effect that witchcraft has to bring into this plane is something I think that a lot of people who strictly put themselves in the New Age spirituality box could benefit from. Does that make sense? The grounding, the earth focus.
Yeah, totally. I love that. I think it's definitely nice and approachable. And I think that everything you shared gives this idea of let's make this playful. Let's make this fun. Let's drop the polarity. Let's drop the judgment. Let's dive in, get our hands dirty and have some fun here. I guess the first thing that we want to kind of touch on is what even is winter solstice, right? So we know that winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. So that's the longest night of the year. I love your perspective on this, Melanie, in that sometimes we view Halloween as being kind of the scariest night of the year, or Samhain, I guess, as far as the pagan kind of holiday. What are your thoughts, I guess, on winter solstice for this piece?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things, myth, folklore, anybody out there who's a book person, anything by Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, archetypal, all of that, all of those personal interests of mine play into my absolute adoration of the Wheel of the Year. And because I homestead, it allows me to be really in tune with literal cycles of the earth, the different seasons that change, which is represented in the pagan Wheel of the Year when the wheel turns. It's so natural and it's so grounding for people to observe and celebrate the earth-based practices. Winter solstice is a tangible thing that happens on this planet, and it is represented on an astrological level where our sun no longer moves forward. It stands still and rests for 3 days, 3 nights, typically, 3 whole 24-hour cycles. It stops moving, and the myths and the stories that compound into the lore of winter solstice is, like we talk about, capital M, magic. And it's also such a testament to the importance of myth in human experience and storytelling, and why we remember things and why we imbue things with importance. All of that is surmised for me in my heart when I talk about winter solstices or the Sabbats or the turning of the wheel of the year, because it ties in together so many just human things. For me, winter solstice, you can talk about it on many levels. I mentioned the pagan wheel of the year is Yule. It's also what Judeo-Christian Western civilization, Christmas. It's the origin of Christmas as well. Yule, Christmas, the winter solstice refers to like the astronomical event of the sun no longer moving in a specific direction in the sky for 3 days, and then it picks back up after a certain point. Like you said, it is the shortest day, longest night because of the axis and the angle of the planet and how much light we're exposed to because of the position of the sun. And then I think it's also just rest season on the homestead. Everything goes internal. I think the mythos that I love the most, because it really crosses over into Judeo-Christian structure, which is what I was brought up in, which most people, whether they are aware of it or not, who live in Western civilization and culture are extremely influenced by, would be the fact that the sun, so the planet, like the star that our entire universe revolves around, the literal sun, stops and dies in our sky, is not living, is not progressing forward for 3 whole days. You can see the association with Jesus Christ, who is the Son of God, who dies and rests for 3 days and is in darkness and then is reborn. So there's that symbolism of the death of the sun, whether it's S-O-N or S-U-N. This is a crossover of mythos, of story and human culture, which is beautiful and something we can definitely play off of when we're developing ritual and structure around the solstices, winter solstice. And then it also talks about and looks at all of the other deities or gods we would consider sun gods. So Ra in the Egyptian pantheon, for example, there is sun gods in literally every pantheon, people, deities, energetics that represent the power of the sun, because that's what humans do. We create myths and stories to understand the world around us, to add depth, and it's freaking magic, and I'm obsessed with it. But this is when the sun gods die in basically every origin story we have, every pantheon we have on the planet, all walks of life. The sun gods are dead during the winter solstice. They rest for 3 days because the sun in the sky is no longer moving forward. And essentially, I've heard it explained many times on the internet, like the alpha is gone. So the sun gods, they are the sun. They have so much power, right? And when we're talking about deities and gods and etc., there's usually a hierarchy, and sun gods are pretty high up on that hierarchy of powerful forces in the universe. And when they are dead for 3 days, there is no one to hold in line a lot of those trickster archetypes or those other sneaky little guys who normally would just abide by the rule of the sun god and maybe leave the humans alone or not play tricks on the human realm or in the 3D. But now that the sun gods are gone, it's a little bit of like, let chaos reign. We can do whatever we want. We can have more influence. And that story, sorry, long way to get to the point of the question here, but the fact that the sun gods are not the pillars holding down the sky and kind of instigating the law in the way our universe runs smoothly with all of these energetics at play. That's why it is commonly referred to as like one of the most dangerous times, quote unquote dangerous, however you choose to view it. It's the darkest time of the year. Like the night is there. If you want to talk about the veil being thin that we often refer to on Samhain, well, in reality, like a veil is always thin, but when the veil lifts, when the veil's out of the way, a lot of the associations with Samhain for me are overlaid into winter solstice, because that's when there is no guardian of the sky. There are no sun gods to uphold a certain level of order. And whoever may desire the little sneaky plays and trickster archetypes and energetic chaos they might ensue tends to happen in the winter solstice. So that's some of my history and my thought process around.
I love that. I think it's really a interesting story. I love that you brought in the mythos. I love that we can kind of get this whole overarching idea and the crossover between the different traditions as well. I feel like for me, what it brought to mind also is like it being like kind of a scary time of year, and like Christmas. I mean, like I'm, obviously more from Judeo-Christian. That's how I was raised and grown up with that kind of religion, more Christianity based. And so like for me, I guess like Christmas this time of year always brought like about like a sadness, kind of like, oh, it's kind of like dreary, it's kind of dark, it's kind of like icky, it's cold, like there's all these kind of like, like seasonal affective depression kind of going on. So I wonder if like maybe it's kind of like maybe that scariness hasn't maybe just like gone away, but maybe it's just kind of transformed into now like we're assigning this like these crappy feelings that are kind of more happening internally as without so within, like that are happening internally are kind of more and manifesting just a little differently, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. There's like, to me, that speaks to like the inherent humanness that we are not separate from nature. And when nature goes through these cycles and we are in tune with the cycles that nature is going through, we feel it. And I think a lot of the dissonance that is caused in our society is, I mean, you could take it very literally, like the fact that we pump electric lights into our eyeballs all the time and it really throws off a circadian rhythm. Like, we're not separate from nature. And when nature goes into a dark period to rest, there is going to be residual effects on our systems. That's what I believe. That's how I believe these things bleed over into our everyday reality when it becomes no longer a mythos. Like a lot of indigenous and pagan cultures and stories are based off of human experience outside in the real world. These are not just stories of the imagination. These are stories that are designed to explain the most real reality there is, which is nature, the fact that we are in a deep rest period. And if we talk about the micro and the macro and the internal and the external, to me, living in tune with the seasons is something that can bring health and alignment into your physical being, to your emotional and your mental realms as well. But to go with the cyclical flow of nature and be tapped in and tuned in, I think resisting that is what has caused a lot of dis-ease in our world and will continue to, in my humble opinion, cause dis-ease in our world until we realize that we are not separate from nature and that the energetics we are tapping into in the cyclical nature of ourselves and nature are aligned, and to honor those things. To fight against rest would truly kill the trees, for example. Like, if the trees don't rest in the winter, if they don't slow down, if they don't go internal, they will die. They've done tests. They die if you pump them full of adrenaline and make them stay awake for forever. And I think it's just such an anchoring back into humanity and reality and nature to realize that, like, hey, fighting the cycles that we're all innately part of might not serve us in the long run. Yeah, so that's what I think about that. I think nature needs rest, and I think we're part of nature, and we're going to get a lot further if we stop pretending like we're not.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. I think nature is our biggest teacher. It's part of the reasons why I feel like plant spirit medicine has been my greatest teachers as well too. There's just so much that we can learn from the patterns in nature, like you said, from the seasons. And I think with this winter solstice and all winter solstice, and this is, I guess, speaking from the Northern Hemisphere piece, because it does flip depending on where you are in the world. But this is like kind of a time, I kind of view this as a time conceptually as like we're kind of diving into our own shadows. We're diving in deep. We're diving into the subconscious. Patterns are being revealed. Things are coming up. Kind of internal ghosts or unintegrated parts might be coming up to be resolved during this time. And we have to travel into the dark to bring the light. I think that's kind of the path of spirituality is kind of what we're doing. So this is like this natural phenomena that's occurring is like this energy is supporting that within ourselves. And so we can utilize this energy in a ritual, in a ceremony, in a way to like align with it. And so that's where I think the ritual can be really beautiful, is like we can actually realign, because like you said, like, let's be honest, we're really not that in tune with nature. Like, I mean, you said like trees know they have to go to sleep. Like, we as humans have not figured that out yet, like to be really in flow with our stress hormones, with our circadian rhythms, with that, right? Like, we really push the envelope and we have so much freedom with that. We haven't maybe learned to fully honor like these cycles of nature that you've been speaking about. So yeah, what are your thoughts as far as what I guess the winter solstice is representing and how we can utilize that energy for ourselves in alignment there?
Yeah, there's so many stories that go into the winter solstice, but I think an overarching theme that is kind of safe to always fall back on if you get confused and overwhelmed would be death and rebirth. We tie back into the death of the sun gods and then the rebirth, right? The darkest night, the longest night, and then the return of the sun. So, of course, you can take that theory, that story arc, right? The death and the rebirth, which is, if again, I mentioned Joseph Campbell earlier, but this is a part of the hero's journey, right? Like the being faced with opposition or challenge and having to hunker down, having to persevere, having to go within to find the internal strength, the internal light. We talked about, you mentioned shadow work, and that's exactly what it is. But I also think like to define shadow work, at least in my mythos, my own story, my own lore, what I like to consider shadow work would be anything that brings dark to light, right? Bringing the light to the dark counts as shadow work for me, right? And we have such a habit of being like, oh, shadow is bad, dark is bad. That is just like our gut response. And there's like a whole story as to why we might associate that. We're not getting into it as a whole other podcast, but this association like stems and bleeds into condemnation and shame and pushing things further into shadow. Sometimes I like to pivot the words I use when I talk about this and like the death and the rebirth cycle. And as opposed to like shadow work, for me, I like to view it almost as like an inventory. Like I'm doing inventory of what's inside of me. I'm doing an inventory of what's in the dark. I'm doing an inventory of everything that's occurred in the year that has just happened. I'm taking stock. I'm taking a look inside. I'm intentionally resting, and I'm no longer looking externally for stimulus, for progress, or for growth. I'm taking the collective pause. I'm going inward and just assessing what I've got going on. Maybe I'm good in there, you know? Like, I think we don't leave that caveat open enough for people. Like, sometimes you don't feel like you have a lot of shadow work to do, and there's no shame in that either. Like, if you're in a place of joy or ease in your life, please don't go looking to cause trouble in there. You can just be in that place too, right? But like that taking inventory of a year that has passed, acknowledging where you might want to pivot, maybe you want to shift, like that kind of thing. That is a gentle contemplative practice. Both Alana and I are heavily involved in the Gene Keys, and Richard Rudd speaks a lot about the art of contemplation. This is a passive thing. This is not going in there and like nitpicking your existence to try and find things to fix about yourself. Because we've all done it in the name of shadow work. When in reality, it's like sometimes this can be a lot more gentle than we maybe think it is. Again, I'm going back to my tree analogy. The tree, all of its energy is now internal. The leaves have fallen. It is reaching deep into the soil. It is reconnecting, recalibrating, realigning, taking inventory, taking stock. What's in there? What am I working with? And that's kind of the shadow work aspect that I view in association with the winter solstice a lot, especially because, of course, with the new year coming up in our Gregorian calendar, we've got, it's that time of year kind of naturally. And if you look at if you observe society's trends this time of year, we are taking stock. We almost have like you mentioned, that melancholy feeling because there's some grief that might arise or some mourning that might happen from taking stock and inventory of the previous year that just happened, right? You have that almost nostalgic, melancholy apprehension around the energies at play. And I think a lot of that, at least in my experience, can be attributed to the inventory I'm taking.
I love that. And I love that, like, the analogy of the tree. It's the symbolism that I utilize a lot in hypnotherapy and meditation. And I think it's really cool to like honor that piece. And I love the, like, also just like when we say like death and rebirth cycles is like also just like, I feel like they always go together, you know, there's always like this death and this rebirth that's like occurring in nature, is like energy is always like transforming. And so like, that's kind of how I almost like view this winter solstice as well, as like, this is a transformational time. Is like, there's a big change happening. Like we've just like gone into our cocoon as a butterfly and like, oh, look, we're like, now there's a change happening within, but also this is a process. I think it's also important to mention is that like, you know, like this next cycle that we're going into, the season of winter now, like is to the spring equinox, is going to be like a time period of, like you said, taking stock and bringing in the light and bringing light to these places of ourselves that are transforming. And like, I like that you also mentioned the gentleness, because I think that sometimes we forget that, like, that's also kind of a natural thing too, is like things can happen with force in nature, absolutely, but you know, like there's certain things that only get revealed with gentleness, that get that actually come available to you knowledge wise with gentleness. Like if you're with an animal in the woods, you know, you coming at it quickly is not going to make it come towards you. You know, it's you sitting there and being patient and just waiting and becoming almost like just so a part of the environment of nature, just becoming so in flow with that moment that maybe that animal might feel safe enough to reveal itself and come up to you, really, right? And I think that is important. And an important piece to mention in that, like with the meditation we're going to be doing too, is like that's kind of more the approach and the energy that we're going to be doing is, yes, we're going to be finding those places of discomfort. And we are kind of looking for them in that way, and like how maybe we've disconnected from our body, but we're going to be not pushing into them, you know, not having to, like, it's not meant to be scary. It's meant to be, like you said, curious and like, and just kind of gently leaning in there, really, right?
Mm-hmm. You hit on so many good points there. Yeah, it's what I hear too is like this human perception of time that nature doesn't have. We have like this rush or this urgency, and sinking back into the awareness. And you can't do this without actually doing this. And what I mean by that is like you can't pretend that you're like trusting the cycles of life if you do not feel the cyclical nature of your existence. To trust that is not going to feel good. You're just going to be uncertain. Mm-hmm. So when I say that, you have to like really cultivate an actual understanding and trust deep within yourself of the fact that your nature, there is no solid end, like in regards to that death and rebirth. You do not die, all especially in the spiritual community, right? Like we talk about, oh, ego deaths or blah blah blah. Like these are aspects of us that fade away or get reintegrated or die, but we have such a human construct of time and finality and this death thing that occurs. And because we don't understand what happens after it, or there's like a precipice, there's a portal that happens, a death portal, and we must blindly walk through the death portal, and we do not know, and we have this innate human fear of the unknown. Acknowledging all of the fact that that is usually in the confines of time, and nature knows intrinsically, the trees, the soil, everything knows that it is cyclical. And if we, again, it's just going to be again and again for me, coming back to the fact that you are not separate from nature. When you die, this flesh suit decomposes back into the earth. The nature that is you does not die, it transforms. There is no solid end here. This is just a part of a process. And that fear really eases for me. And this has truly been one of the deepest gifts of my spiritual journey, or my connection to nature, or my pursuit into witchcraft, or observing the seasons, and double down so much within homesteading and being witnessed to this and having my hands in the dirt and being part of that life cycle and really living that cycle, is this comfort in knowing that it's just transition. It's never end. You know, it's never like that solid line of period. It's the energy transforms. We go back to nature. It's cyclical. Again and again, the solstices remind me of the cycles. You can see it in the moons. You can see it in the trees. You can see it in nature everywhere. It is a surrendering to the fact that there is a cycle going on. And when we have to go into those moments and find that ending, that death, to release it with gentleness, as opposed to hanging on with stuff in fear. And like, this is so much easier said than done. It's not easy to just be like, okay, I will dissolve. That's fine. The fear of dissolving is real. You got an ego for a reason. But that's a big part of it for me is the time constraints that humans perceive that maybe aren't real.
Totally, yeah. And I think where most people get stuck, I know myself included, on like, you know, we ask spirit for something and it's like it's not like this, it's not quick, you know, it's and there's like that lack of patience. And I think we sometimes get in our own way and come out of alignment very quickly when we're not aware, I guess, of that weird kind of nature that we have with our humanness to not really be in that alignment of timing with nature.
Totally.
So yeah, I guess the next piece that we kind of want to talk about is why would we do a ritual? Like we said, it's like we're going to try and harness this energy. And so with being playful here, I want to kind of dive into what are some of the elements and things that we can include in our ritual. And, why do we include these things? Where do they come from? And, I invite you as a listener, if you're planning on doing this ritual, would be to maybe just like tune into your intuition. If there's something that we talk about and bring up and you're like, oh, that speaks to me, maybe like just jot it down, and maybe it is something that you should include in your ritual. So Melanie, you are so beautiful at explaining these different elements that we might want to bring in. What is kind of your top one that you would want to include potentially in a winter solstice ritual?
Yeah, going back, I think, to the stories for me is usually what I do, because it's grounding and what I feel like makes us human. So for me, that is the sun. And then you can look at all of the things that are associated with the sun, whether you can, so however you want to break this down is really up to you. But a primary way I approach things is like viewing it in the construct, I guess, of astrology. So you can look at like what's associated with the sun. Obviously, the sun is a luminary in the sky. It brings light, it brings warmth. The entire universe, all of our planets here, solar system, I shouldn't say universe, the entire solar system revolves around the sun. So that's already giving you information. That's already giving you correspondences. And it's already kind of like you get to interpret and divine out of the stories what is going to align and work with you, and what aspects of the astrological or astronomical events that are occurring that you want to utilize in a ritual. And that same approach, I guess, is brought into what other associated herbs or correspondences. So from the fact that we're working, for me, with the solar energy, the sun energy, you can look at your sun deities, your solar deities, whoever that is for you. If you work with a specific pantheon, or if you just want to pick a name out of a hat of a sun deity, you can work with them. Juxtaposition, you can switch and work with maybe dark goddess energy. You can go to the other side of the spectrum and see what shadows we're diving deep in. Associations with the winter solstice at large, you can incorporate, of course, sun, the fire element. That leads into color associations. We've got reds and orange and gold. And then if you take a nice long look at nature, again, I think this is my favorite part about being or observing the wheel of the year, being an earth-based person / practitioner. I can just look outside and see what is going on outside, and then bring that into my ritual or into my altar space. And for me, I live in a subalpine forest in the middle of nowhere. So I've got evergreens, I've got pine, I've got cedar, things like pine cones. There's going to be snow. So you've got the greens, the reds, the silvers, the golds for colors that you can bring in. You can go out and bring in these actual plants, things like holly or whatever evergreens you might be working with. Really, the correspondences and associations, when it comes to the Sabbats, you have such a vast array of things at your disposal. And you have these collective associations with them, right? Christmas is an incredible example, because Christmas is Yule, and the associations and the celebrations and the correspondences and the decorations and all of these things that we do at Christmas are essentially based off of Yule. So without stepping on any toes, Christmas is basically pagan. And again, that's a whole other podcast. I won't go too much into it, but bringing a tree inside, working with those kinds of colored lights. Standard Christmas decorations are incredible for the winter solstice or for Yule, because they are already built around this construct of observing these things within nature. So the pine and the warming spices, right? You can always think of things in like that juxtaposition as well. So if we're working with the sun, then we're also working with the shadow. If we're working with the coldness of a winter solstice, then we're also working with herbs and things that can bring in warmth. Things like cinnamon, things like nutmeg, that fire element of the sun. All of the herbs that are sun associated, things like chamomile can even be considered when you're working with a winter solstice ritual, because it has that sun element. So before we bombard you too much with this information, because you can do a Google search and you'll find all of these associations as well. But I think the piece of value that Alchemia might be able to provide for you is the space, the time, and the encouragement to figure out what really resonates for you in association to winter solstice. I think individuals, whether you're beginning on like a witchcraft practice or within spirituality, have like this hardcore tendency to search outside of themselves first for answers so they can figure out how to do something right. And while I am entirely on board with research and history and being considerate and aware of the dynamics and practices you are working within, I am even more on board with checking in with your internal guidance system, who you are, and what feels right for you. So if you hate pine, maybe consider cedar. Or if you hate cinnamon, maybe consider working with something more like nutmeg or clove or rosemary or a citrus association. A lot of things like oranges and such can be used within the winter solstice as well. So that space to realize what you associate with Christmas. For me, magic, capital M magic, only became interesting when I realized that I could find within myself the things that light me up, and I can work with those things. I think in my first ever winter solstice altar I created, I cut out little snowflakes out of pieces of paper like you do in elementary school. And to this day, that is part of the way I celebrate winter solstice because it means something to me. And if you do not live in British Columbia, Canada, in the middle of nowhere, and it does not snow for you, that means nothing. So why would you work with that association? This is what I mean by taking that time to observe your own shit.
Totally. No, I love that. And I love everything that you brought up because I think it is super important that we are like to mention, like we are empowering you to do this for yourself and not to give your power away to a step-by-step guide, which I think so many of us like really want in everything in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to really like honor and get into the process of, making these choices for yourself and trusting that like, the integrity of that. You'll learn from it. If it wasn't right, you'll learn next time. Oh, actually, I really don't like cinnamon. Okay, we're not going to use that next time or whatever, right? So it's like it's really flexing that muscle, and it's also making it, like you said, more creative and fun. What do you recommend? Maybe you have a recommendation, maybe you don't, for people who might just kind of be like overwhelmed by all of this, by like making choices. Like they're so used to being like, I just want somebody to tell me what to do, because I think that's a real energy that a lot of us deal with.
Primarily, I would recommend our blog where we will tell you exactly what to do. But I think the big difference between mastery and just starting is that freedom that you start to feel when you start to feel comfortable within a space to get creative, right? And it's hard when you're having these conversations because I don't want to use the language that makes something sound better than something else. But with familiarity comes almost a level of potency. And I think that's what I'm referring to when I talk about those associations to yourself as well. If you do not know where to start, you already know that, right? And using everything as divination can be a really powerful thing. So to know that you are not familiar with this, and that's okay, or that it's overwhelming, and that's okay, you can shape an entire ritual or an introduction as a rebirth into intentionally practicing with the seasons, or the creativity piece to me is what it comes down to. You can get really creative and you can start really simply. I think fundamentals and basics, whether we're talking witchcraft, which is essentially what this conversation is really geared towards, sympathetic magic, making a white candle mean something, imbuing your intention, whatever label or category or box you want to put any of this in, I think it's really important to understand that the power lies with you. Your intention means a lot. And I wish I could remember who said this. It might be Molly Roberts on Her Speaks on YouTube. She's Art Witch. She has books. She's beautiful. I feel really bad that I can't remember exactly her information, but she always says, it's sacred when you make it so. And I think that's it. That's magic. That's you. That's your power in this world. That's the power of will. It is sacred when you make it so. So if your ritual is a cup of red wine and a fire, it is sacred when the intention is there. It is sacred when you have just a candle in front of you. That is sacred. How you move in this world can be sacred, can be magic. That's it. And honestly, sometimes the more complicated and the more things and the more steps you add, the worse it is, because you don't know what you're anchoring in. You don't know what you're holding down. So I think my main recommendation would be like hella clear on what you want. Make sure you know your intention. Even the intention can be simple as long as you're clear on what it is. You don't have to use a lot of herbs. You can use one herb. You can just use a candle. You don't have to use either. You can use the mind castle that you are gifted with and do this all internally or with the meditation that we're about to go through. It does not have to be overly complicated. So if it is intimidating, action is better than inaction. So do less. Do less. Say less. Make it more simple. Think about do a meditation thinking about the sun. Close your eyes and imagine what it feels like to have the sun beating on your face. Yeah. It doesn't have to be those layers. And that's the testament to the mastery level. When you get comfortable with those fundamentals, you get comfortable listening to your inner guidance system with things that hit hard for you, things that hit home for you. If you start building relationship with herbs, then you can start adding these layers and levels of complexity to your work, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to start there. And I think that was one of the hardest things to actually come to terms with when I began working and crafting things, like actually crafting magic or intentional pieces of juju, was the fact that the really cool, tattered, old-looking grimoire is built year after year. You don't start with that. You don't start with the elaborate altars. You start with the really simple things. And a lot of that stuff can become materialistic and extra and unneeded. So not being ashamed of the fact that you're at a fundamental level, and within those fundamentals, whether you're talking sports, football players, you go back to fundamentals. Artist, your painting looks like shit, you go back to fundamentals. Witchcraft, nothing's working out, you're confused as fuck, you go back to fundamentals. It is the starting of it all. And I think that's like a beautiful place to be. It's exciting. It's an exciting place to be because the world's your oyster.
I love that. And that's such a interesting, using the word excitement, I think also is like that nervousness, that fear can sometimes kind of get, confused with the excitement. And so like leaning in more to that excitement. And as like a kind of a friendship anecdote as well, I mean, Melanie was a huge inspiration for me to get back in touch with my creativity. And one of the things like in that process, you talked a lot about kind of what you just said, but in that process for me, what was a big reflection was the expectation, dropping the expectation of how it's going to look, and like, just not getting caught up in like perfectionistic tendencies, not judging how you think something should look, and just showing up for what is. And I think that's, when you're talking about magic, capital M, that's like really like, you can't like expect it, like it comes when it comes, and you're going to have it when you have it. It's not something that we can force or make happen by pushing it, right, or willing it so. So yeah, I would definitely recommend as well to everything you just said, just to drop the expectations and just show up with your intention, and we're going to guide you through that intention with the meditation. So we'll allow some space for that to kind of come to you if you don't have something already in mind. And we've crafted a beautiful candle magic ritual to do after the meditation. And again, like Melanie said, though, make this your own, use what works for you. The candle is a simple way to do it. Melanie, I know we talked earlier about like, a white candle is really all that you need, right? You can use colors if you want, but white's always a good default to start with. If you're not sure, you don't have maybe a specific color connection to another color.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, generically speaking, you can always use a white candle for pretty much everything. That being said, of course, this is about layering. Layering associations means layering intention. And when you layer intention, you're building power / potency. So if you have a red candle, or if you have a really fun like silver candle or a gold candle or a green candle, all of that can be used and utilized to add a layer of potency. The other thing that I find fun that I've done in the past is getting like scented candles. Christmas time, there's a lot of candles. If you don't know this, Christmas decor, go out into the store, Dollarama, dollar stores. Go out there. There's like scented pine or cinnamon, or I've seen those like red, green candles. Have fun with it. there's a lot of options.
Love that. And so, I guess the next piece is going to be just kind of, we're going to take a few moments now and walk you through the setup of your ritual and what you might need. And the first thing is going to be obviously this meditation. You're going to need to have this meditation, probably have a journal and pen. You're going to need some sort of a cleansing tool for yourself, whether that is, cedar or sage or Palo Santo. I personally am going to use, before we start this, some mapacho, and we'll talk more about that. It says ceremonial tobacco. But whatever you have, and again, whatever you feel called to, cedar's a beautiful one, like Melanie had mentioned, because it is something that is available and alive this time of year too. So you kind of bring in that element in your cleansing tools as well. But whatever you have, even just a crystal selenite wand, whatever you have, you can utilize for this piece. You're going to want to have your white candle or your colored candle that you're going to use for the main candle magic that we're going to imbue with our intentions. And then we're going to also need whatever objects or herbs or decorations you decide to bring in with intention, with purpose, to imbue your candle and to support the ritual as well. So like we said, that could be like rosemary or chamomile, or it could be some crystals, or it could be boughs of cedar, pine, your favorite Christmas decoration, whatever that is, but knowing why you're doing it, I think, is an important piece for us to mention. In fact, we maybe recommend writing down what you're putting into your ritual and why, so that you're sure as to that you've gotten all the elements of support that you want to creatively bring in to lift your intention and to, bring in that magic. And maybe there's also some relevance. Again, I'm new and I don't do this piece, but maybe you can speak to this, Melanie, of writing down your rituals, to maybe review later, even as well as was this successful? Do I really like this? Like you said, it's you're starting simple and maybe, I like this, but maybe I need to bring in this next element next time. And that can also be, I think, a beautiful way to approach this.
Yeah. It's record keeping is probably the number one way to get clear on those layers of intention and layers of potency, figure out what works and what doesn't work for you, and then be able to add those layers later on to get to a more masterful experience of witchcraft. I think across the board, most people will agree with that. Your Book of Shadows or creating a grimoire, record keeping is super important. I think at least write down, if you're working with plants, specific herbs, specific crystals, get clear and write down your intention. At least write down a clear ingredient list, because then you can kind of reference back and be like, oh, rosemary hates me. And then maybe you need to look at what rosemary and you don't click or something like that, right? So, it's building relationships so that you can be, you want to be clear on the relationships you're trying to build. And if something's not working, you want to be able to look back and be like, oh, that didn't go well.
Yeah, I think that's a fun thing to say too, is like these plant spirits and all of these energies you're working with, they might not align with you. And like you said, we don't like everybody out there. We're not meant to be friends with everybody out there. Not all people are for us, not all plants and crystals and animals, they're not all for us. So not everything is medicine for you. So learning what is medicine and what isn't, I think, is a valuable part of this process as well too.
Yeah. That's a huge topic, but it's so important. Don't use your deities and your plants and your associations as slot machines. This is about building relationships and connecting with the plants that you're working with. Don't just go to them and ask them to do all the stuff for you. If I was a plant, I'd tell you to eat a dick.
juicy stuff for sure. No. And I know as we dive more into plant medicine, we will for sure need to do a blog about that, because that's a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah,
absolutely. So the next thing you're going to need, so once you have that list and maybe you've kind of gathered what you think you might use, by the end of the meditation, you might change your mind and you might just be like, actually, I just want to use this one item, or I just want to use this one piece. And so, having it at the ready so you can make that choice intuitively in the moment as well would be a good idea. As well, we are going to need you to set a space for you to meditate. So it could be sitting up meditation cushion, could even be on your bed if you want to, maybe a yoga mat, whatever you feel comfortable with. And it's going to allow you to go deep within. If you're too uncomfortable sitting upright meditating because it's not something you do frequently, that's okay. Sometimes I just like to lay down
That's
because I
sweet.
can really let go. Yeah, and it's just nice. How often do we let ourselves really like let go and relax and go deep into parasympathetic? And I think that comes back to, again, is like meeting your body where you're at. Like you said, I think we can get really structured and too pushy sometimes with specifically meditation practice, but also I think, I'm sure with any realm of expertise, people can do that. So yeah, just like listening to where your body's at, set your space for your meditation. And then you're going to want to have everything that you're going to need for your ritual, your candle, whatever you're imbuing with, nearby, your journals nearby. And once you guys all have that set, we'll meet back here and we'll start the meditation. All right. So now that you've gathered all your tools, everything that you're going to potentially use for ceremony, and you're in your space that you're going to be meditating in with everything nearby, your journal nearby, we're just going to start by clearing and cleansing your space. So whatever tool you've chosen to clear your space and clear yourself, just do that. I have Palo Santo and sage here, but you can use cedar, you can use garlic skins, you can use rosemary, whatever you're feeling called to use or that you have. Just take the time to intend on clearing yourself, your space. I like to take some deep breaths while I'm doing. You might notice physically in your body some energy might already be moving at this point. Good. And now that you've cleansed your space, I want you to just kind of get settled, either seated on your cushion or laying down, wherever you are, just settling into the body with a few connected breaths. Just taking a deep breath in through the nose. Big sigh out the mouth. And this may very well be the deepest breath that you've taken all day. And just leaning into that as you do a couple more. Really feeling the letting go on that out breath. Now just asking the mind to step aside for the duration of this ritual and meditation. Just inviting the mind to take a little break, even just for now, so we can connect ourselves into the depth of our unknown with trust. But just watching the mind, if you're noticing the mind is present. And instead of jumping on those trains of thought, just watching them pass by, not grabbing on to any one, but just becoming the observer of them all. Now connecting deeper into your body, just noticing your feet. Noticing how they're feeling in this moment. Maybe you haven't connected here in a while. Just spending some moments listening to your feet. Sending some breath all the way down into your feet. And from the soles of your feet, imagine sending down deep roots. These roots travel deep through the layers of soil, of rock, the underground rivers, the crystal caves, going deep and deep until you find your roots deep within your own cave. This cave is dimly lit, and as you travel through the roots of this cave, you're traveling through the depths of your own subconscious. And in this space, as you are journeying deep within yourself now, take a pause and just call on any allies, maybe plants, guides, deities, angels, or ancestors, whoever you're working with closely, just inviting this support in as we travel into our depths, into our shadows. feeling Mother Earth supporting you and surrounding you, her warmth, her love enveloping you in this darkness. Just finding yourself now walking. And as you walk, we curiously call forth that which needs to be transformed, that which needs to be revealed during this darkness. Calling in and honoring as you walk all that you've experienced this past year, this past season. Honoring all the suffering, all the blessings, all of the shifts and all of the continued struggles. Calling to the forefront of your mind all that your being has been shifting through, consciously and unconsciously. Trusting that whether your mind has labeled this as good or bad, that it is all an energy that will fuel this transformation. And as you travel into these caves, you're traveling into the darkness of yourself. Traveling deeper as you scan your body, finding any tension, any spaces that might be just calling out for attention, or maybe even repelling your attention, just noticing what is here now. We're going to hold these spaces of discomfort, these spaces of maybe even just unknown, in a space of love. And you can imagine this love almost like a smile, calling forth the energy of that smile as it spreads a beautiful warmth across your heart. And as you travel through this darkness, you notice that you found some light within. And these spaces begin to soften, and the light slowly begins to return. And these spaces may show you exactly what is transforming, or they may not. And either is okay. And if you struggle to connect to this sensation of love, I want you to imagine in this dark space calling on a light. Maybe even just a candle flame. And that this light of a small candle brings light to these areas of darkness, lighting up all that needs to be seen and acknowledged within. And as you soften, just inviting all these spaces to come forth, being brave to lean in and travel into, and little by little, breath by breath, moment by moment, with deep patience, these spaces begin to reveal themselves to you. Not needing anything other than your presence and trust, the light penetrates deeper and deeper with each and every breath. And you notice that as these spaces begin to open, that many of them are craving to be discovered, wishing to be seen, to be transformed, to be set free. As natural as breathing, this light is welcomed deep into your being. As it transforms negative thought patterns, beliefs. It travels deep lighting up every single cell of your being, deep into every strand of DNA, lighting up, transmuting, transforming. And as this light goes deeper and deeper into your being, you notice this warmth spreading through you deeper and deeper, like the warmth of a fire after a cold day, like the warmth of the sunrise after a long night. And as you travel these spaces, you can call upon the energy of the winter solstice to show you what is ready to release, what is ready to change, to be reborn, to transform. What have you been consciously working through or struggling through this past season? Is there anything else that you wish to call in or experience? Allowing this light to continue to fill you up. Do you allow these questions to percolate? Trusting that from this point forward, as the days get longer, you will invite more and more light into your being to transform all that is meant to. Honoring this element of fire, this warmth, this light spreading through you, symbolic of the energy of the sun. As it lights up the shadows of your being, you begin to find your way out of the darkness. And with patience and trust, the outward manifestations of life will soon begin again. Breathing as you take a few more breaths here. Breathing into those areas of tension as you let light flow in more and more. Realizing, if you haven't already, that this bringing in of light is infinite. The depths of your being is infinite. And just enjoying this process of transformation. Being gentle, loving, maybe a little cozy with yourself in this space. Sitting as long as you wish with the hearth of this fire, this light, for as long as you need. And when you're ready, you can begin to come back into their body, into the space. So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the meditation. So let's just take a few moments now to really write down everything that came to you, if anything specific came up during that meditation. And take some time to set your intention as well for this ritual. You're also going to tune into maybe what correspondences, what allies, what elements you're going to want to bring into this ritual for yourself, and maybe just write down that recipe of your own ritual and maybe the reason why you're including that for quality. And I'm going to pass this over to Melanie now, and she can talk a little bit more about choosing this piece.
Lovely meditation, ready to go. Like I've said a bit in the beginning of our discussion, you can make this as detailed and complicated or as involved as you would like, or you can do it a little bit more surface level. If you are wanting to work with herbs, as we know, have a lot of different associations. So for rosemary is a very classic example. Rosemary can be used for purifying, or it can be used for protection. So once you have gotten clear on the intention that has kind of come to you out of the meditation, and you know what you're going to want to have this ritual or this candle magic working be dedicated to or around, that gives you the opportunity to call on specific traits of the tools, the correspondences, and the associations you're working with. So for me, I pretty much do rosemary and everything. So I will be using rosemary. I've got peppermint as well. I have some of my own personal blends, like my black salt that has other protective herbs burnt and blended in with some salt. I've also got a protection oil that I've made, which is, again, imbued with a bunch of different protection herbs. I'm big about protection when it comes into the winter solstice because there's a lot of energies going on. So that's going to be one of my focuses of my intention, which is why I'm calling on the protective properties of rosemary, of my oils, and my black salt. I also have a personal herb, or what I would call a personal herb, because it has a lot of associations for me when it comes to winter solstice, which is peppermint. I'll automatically think of candy canes and peppermint chocolate, hot chocolates, and all of that stuff. So peppermint is really Yule time for me. It's very fresh. And there is a level of freshness, purification, and protection that I want to be calling in that post-rebirth moment. So those are the herbs that I'm going to be working with. And while I work with these herbs, I'm just going to hold them. Again, you can do this however you want to do this. But for me, I usually just lay my hands on them and I talk to them like they're a friend. Whether I say things out loud or I say it in my head or I whisper it to them, I will literally talk to peppermint as it is an embodied spirit that I am calling on for aid in this candle magic ritual. And I will ask peppermint to help me purify myself, to lend that quality of its essence to my working. So rosemary, again, if you're not clear on the correspondences exactly for what you're working with, then do a quick Google, of course, or feel into what comes up for you in association to that herb. Another good one that is really in high quantities in both my protection oil and my black salt would be cinnamon. Cinnamon is associated with the fire element. It is very spicy. It bridges the gap between sweet and savory. It has a lot of that passion, that quick acting intensity to it. I will call on cinnamon often to add a little bit pep to the step of whatever I'm energetically working with. So if you're using peppermint or cinnamon or nutmeg or frankincense and myrrh, all of these herbs are associated with Yule. Get clear on what you're asking them to do for you within that working. This is kind of the time to do that before you start assembling things, is to, like Alana said, write down what you're asking every aspect of your ritual to perform or lend to your energetic working.
So now that we have our intention and we've chosen all of our allies and all of our support that we're going to bring into this ritual, now we're going to go into crafting our ritual.
So like I've mentioned and caveated several times in this video already, there's so many ways to do this, and I would highly recommend you figure out what you like the most. For me, I usually just start with my candle and I make sure everything I'm working with is cleansed and cleared. We've touched on this already, but you just want to make sure that you know what energies you're working with. So if you didn't bring it into the space, like for example, if you got your candle from the dollar store or from a like a reuse store, like a Value Village or something like that, there's going to be gunk, energetic gunk on your stuff. Make sure you cleanse things before you work with them. And now that we have all of our tools in front of us, we have the herbs that we're wanting to work with, we have our intention cleared. At this point, you dress the candle, you put it all together. And I like to do this before I attach it to my little tray that I burn things on. And I will almost always start with an oil, because I have my little black cat oil. It's a protection oil. And I will, depending on what working I'm doing, I'll just rub it all over my candle. So you're going to either dress the specific candle, or if you don't have oils and you don't want to be putting your herbs onto the candle because you're concerned about how it's going to burn or if it's going to get too big, because that can happen when you're putting dried herbs on a candle, you can dress the plate around the candle. So if you're working in like a cauldron, or for myself, I have like a silver plate that I do a lot of this stuff on, I will just sprinkle or lay the herbs in a circle or in a fun mandala pattern around my candle. And that is also dressing the candle. It's just not on the physical candle. It's really up to you. At this point, when you are combining and mixing and dressing your candle, you're going to want to be holding the intention and the attributes of everything you're working with in your mind. And I think the thing that is the most helpful when you're doing this is to hold the feeling of the outcome. So I'm not talking about like, wow, I really want this thing, and you're paying attention to how bad you want something. The best suggestion I have to make magic really hit hard for you in your life is to hold the feeling of completion and gratitude in you while you're putting together your workings. So if you are wanting, this is an off-topic example, but if you're wanting money, don't hold in your mind how bad you want money. Embody what it would feel like to be rich. And there's a really big difference in that energetic playground when you're doing this. I am wanting to hold in my heart the intention that I discovered in the darkness in that meditation, and what I'm bringing into the light, and what I'm following through out of my death and rebirth cycles, and what I'm calling back into existence for myself when the return of the light happens. That's what I'm focusing on, the completion of that and that level of gratitude, like it already exists. So while I dress my candle, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how peppermint is going to imbue my working with its unique flavor and its unique energetics. Same with rosemary, same with my protection oil and the fire element of the candle itself. I am imagining, visualizing, and embodying the emotions that these signatures bring to the table. Depending on what equipment you're working with, whether you have a candle holder, or like me, if you're working with a plate, you can just like melt the bottom of your candle and stick it to your plate, or stick it to your candle holder, shove it into wherever you're going to be burning it, with fire safety in the forefront of your mind, because fire safety. Once you get your candle secure, you can light it when you feel called to. So some people like to sit with it unlit for a little while longer while they really focus on their intention, and then light it at the end of this. But what I often do is I will adhere my candle to the holder or to the plate or within the herbs, however I'm setting it up. Then I will light my candle, and then sitting with that flame and doing a bit of a fire gazing approach, I will just sit with the energetics of the completion of this candle magic spell. I live in my head a lot of the time, and I'm really good at visualizing things. I will go on visual tangents and quests in my mind while this candle burns in front of me, and I will do my best to embody the emotional outcome that I am desiring or that I am calling into existence at this time. I will sit there and daydream 20 different ways it would beautifully unfold in my life, for example. This is very meditative. I use a lot of visuals. It depends on what kind of candle you're using, and again, personal preference, how long you want to sit with this candle. You do not have to sit with the candle until the candle burns out. I have in the past, because winter solstice is something that occurs over the course of 3 days, I have lit my candle the first night, extinguished it, lit it the second night, extinguished it, and then lit it the third night as well. So I burn the candle the 3 nights that cover the winter solstice, whatever sits right for you. There's a bit of a superstition and or folklore around blowing out your candle. If that's something that you're apprehensive about, I would just like do the spit thing, where you just grab the flame and put it out that way. Or you can have like one of those candle putter outers. Or if you don't care, you can just blow it out. It's up to you. But yeah, so depending on how you want to work it, you can sit with the candle for a long period of time. You can sit with the candle with a short period of time. You can light it, make sure that it's not going to burn your house down and walk away. It can be burning in the background. It can be lit throughout the Christmas or holiday season. It's really whatever intention you decide. I would say decide before you light the candle. So just go into this process knowing how you're going to play this out. Don't change your mind halfway through. Whatever you want to do is fine, as long as you know intentionally why you're doing what you're doing. So that's my caveat for that.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the close of our winter solstice ritual.
This has been like one of my favorite topics to cover. And I know on a personal note, it's really fun to be able to share with you some like nifty tips and tricks, I guess, around working with a ritual or the Sabbats in this way. Your meditation added so much potency to something I wouldn't usually dive into that much depth of when I'm doing a ritual like this. So like such a blessing to have a deep guided meditation like that. I think you've done great for your first dive into winter solstice-ness, and it's been so much fun for me.
Thank you. Yes, I can't even thank you enough for all of the beautiful teachings that you gave with myself and with everybody today. I feel a lot better diving into this and excited about it. And there were just so many more connections fractally that I made that like I hadn't made before. So yeah, this was really cool. I hope you all enjoyed it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you did. And if you like this and you maybe want more of a step-by-step guide, also check out our blog. It'll be linked below. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.